Hey, what's up, guys? It's TheWokeIndigo 11 here. Today, I'm going to be answering a question that a lot of you have probably had your whole lives, and that question is the United States government corrupt? And if it is, how did this happen? So, let's get into it. Well, first of all, most of you probably know the United States was founded on a constitution which was supposed to keep everything running smoothly for the future. It was supposed to be a basic ground set of rules that never change so that corruption in the government can never happen. But unfortunately, I don't remember who said this quote, but it's a quote that has stuck with me a lot, and specifically relating to the government, I think makes perfect sense. And that quote is, "Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely." So let's get into it. The United States government, well, first of all, something that a lot of you might not actually know about the United States government is that the United States government does not actually own and create its own currency. So, wait, what do you mean the United States government doesn't create its own money? How does that work? Well, let's just say this is the start to going down the rabbit hole that a lot of you probably aren't prepared for, but are going to be very grateful you learned about, because this one fact has changed so much of our history, not just in the United States, but worldwide, and barely anyone knows about it. So, the Federal Reserve. About 100 years ago, three very, very rich families wanted power, and they wanted to basically, well, rule the world, you know. So, what did they do? They tricked some politicians, and here's basically how the story goes. I'm sure you've heard of John D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan back in history class in elementary school, junior high, whatever. So, what you might not know about these people is just how big of an influence they actually played in our country's history. You see, they were some of the richest people in the history of the world at that time, and that money just doesn't disappear. They have kids, they have grandkids, it gets passed down from generation. But here's where it gets interesting. You heard me mention earlier that the United States does not actually create its own currency. So, who does? Well, it's called the Federal Reserve. And if you look on a dollar bill, right here at the top, it says, the very top thing, it says Federal Reserve Note, which you can't see because it's backward, but go look at a dollar. So, Federal Reserve Note. The United States does not make its own currency. So, how does this system work? Well, it's called a centralized bank. And nowadays, hardly anyone knows what that means. But back a few hundred years ago, a lot of people knew what it was, and a lot of people were very afraid and opposed to this form of banking system because it essentially leads to corruption and economic problems for whatever country it is going through. So here's what happened, all right? Three families, Rockefellers, the Morgans, and the Rothschilds, basically swindled and pulled a fast one on some politicians in the United States government, which basically allowed them to write a law and put it into place that states that the Rothschilds, the Morgans, and the Rockefellers create this bank called the Federal Reserve. And they are allowed to, and here's where it gets insane. You're not even going to believe this. They are physically allowed to create money out of thin air. Yes, you heard me. They are allowed to create money out of thin air with absolutely no repercussions. And here's where it gets even more insane. They create money for free, and then they charge interest to the federal government, which means that, as you know, our government is in debt, we've got a deficit, and so every so often we have to borrow money through treasury bonds. So how that works is, say for every $100 the United States government loans from the Federal Reserve, they have to pay a 1% interest on that. That means that every single time the United States is using its own accepted currency, they are losing money on it. And our country is losing money, which means that the whole system is completely rigged. So you might have wondered to myself, why is it so hard to make good money? Why is it so hard to find a good job? Why is it so hard to have my needs paid for? Food, expenses and have money to actually travel and enjoy my life? Well, the answer is very simple. The system is rigged against us. It's rigged against everyone that isn't in the elite and the federal government. And because the Federal Reserve actually is allowed to create money out of thin air, that gives them essentially unlimited power. You see, money talks. And when money talks, people listen. So imagine being able to bribe anyone in the entire world because you have unlimited money. Well, everybody has a point at which they'll sell out. And when you have unlimited money, you can always reach that point. So essentially, what it has devolved into since the inception of the Federal Reserve is that the Federal Reserve, with how much power they have, basically buys and pays out all of the politicians so that the Federal Reserve essentially controls America. America, the United States of America, does not control their government. The Federal Reserve is at the bottom and behind everything. So, a lot of you might be thinking to yourselves, what? How does no one know this? How does nobody realize that there's a family out there that has this much power and is this corrupt? Well, because they don't want us to know. Frankly, they want us to be sheep, because every single tax dollar that is taken from us is more power. Every single time that we are busy watching sports, TV, watching Family Guy, not paying attention to the events of the world and what's really going on, they win. Because if everybody in America knew exactly how the federal banking system worked, there'd be a revolution tomorrow. And I believe that's a quote from a famous person in history. But what can we do about it? Well, actually, a few presidents have tried to fix this system, and you might notice a theme with some of these presidents. Well, the first one was Abraham Lincoln, and correct me in the comments if I'm wrong if this was the first president to try this, but he had a United States-backed dollar called the greenback. Or Greenback, I think. Yeah, and then, well, we all know what happened to him. And I believe also JFK wanted to do a United States dollar as well, and he was shot and killed. So essentially, anyone that tries to mess with the Federal Reserve, they die, because they are the most elite, most rich, most wealthy, most powerful families in the entire world. And for the majority of Americans and people in the world, they don't even realize that they're there. And yet they have such a major influence on not just America, but all over the world. You see, the United States dollar doesn't just affect the United States currency, it affects all other currencies because of how big and powerful the United States dollar has and how much sway it has. So essentially, the Federal Reserve has been tearing our country apart for over 100 years now. And there's really not much we can do about it unless we learn about this information and decide to make a change. So this all leads into what I'm going to be talking about in a future video, which is the Illuminati and the Freemasons and the secret societies behind America. Because, as I stated, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you learned something, and if you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe and comment, and I'll see you in the next time's video.